Hello and welcome to Düzdan Shah. My name is Ismail Jalilov, and I'm an Azerbaijani and American journalist, broadcasting from Washington, D.C. The sad irony is we almost have to be located an ocean away from our country in order to bring impartial, unbiased, and fair news to the people inside the country on sensitive subjects such as political rights, human rights, political prisoners, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of religion. This is what we cover. Düzdanışak means let's talk straight. And this is a direct equivalent of a phrase that also exists in the American English, let's sit crooked and talk straight. So this is exactly what we do here, no more and no less. Sometimes we sit crooked, but we always talk straight. A couple of words about myself, to those of you who don't know me, and I'm sure there are a lot of you. Straight does not have a sexual identity-related connotation in my native language, because otherwise that would have been an irony in and of itself. I'm an openly gay journalist, and of course, it informs who I am, it informs the angle from which I'm looking at things, my perspective, and the issues that are important to the LGBT community are also close to my heart. The interview you're about to see was taped in Strasbourg, France, a few days ago on 30th of January 2020, during the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe winter session, where Azerbaijan figured prominently. Our interlocutor is Thórhildur Sunna Ævarsdóttir, a member of the parliament from Iceland, who was also charged with filing a report on the issue of political prisoners in Azerbaijan. We taped the interview moments after the resolution adopting this report was passed by the Council of Europe, and effectively, this European institution has recognized that political prisoners do exist in our country. I hope you like the interview, and if you do, please subscribe to our channel, like it, share it, discuss it, because the people inside the country would really be able to use your support. Thank you. Ms. Ævarsdóttir, what was the message that today's proceedings was sending to the government and the people of Azerbaijan?
It was very clear that the Assembly agreed that Azerbaijan has a problem, and this problem is one of political prisoners. Now, this is a very serious sign for a democracy, that it imprisons people for having a differing viewpoint from the government, from basically participating in political activities that are not to the liking of the government. That means something very serious for a democracy when the difference of opinion is not allowed. It's an erosion of it. So this assembly was, first of all, making a very clear statement. You have a problem, and secondly, you have to fix it. And we had concrete suggestions on how to do that. And we also, of course, called on our Committee of Ministers to continue working with us on this problem.
In your opening statement, you asked a question. Was the commitment made in bad faith? Was Azerbaijan only pretending to implement the rules? What do you think the answer to that question is? Was Azerbaijan pretending? Was the commitment made in bad faith?
Well, it's hard to answer that question because I cannot speak to what is in their mind. But of course, what they say today is that they have never recognized this problem and that they will never recognize this problem. And that is a very different stance than the one that they took when they joined the Council of Europe, in terms of the fact that they admitted that there was a problem and that they needed to release political prisoners. So it does very much bring into question how much honesty was behind this kind of collaboration, or whether it was just paying lip service to the Council of Europe in order to be allowed to get inside. And that's why I raised the question, because I think if one of the conditions of your admittance, of your accession to the organization, is that you need to fix this problem, and then you tell us 20 years later, we've never admitted that there is a problem, I of course see a problem with that. I think that it's not a very honest approach.
Were you surprised that so many people questioned the very meaning of what political prisoners are, or whether Azerbaijan does or does not have the political prisoners? Was it surprising at all to hear?
No, not really. I mean, this has been an ongoing debate now for 20 years, and I think that the same questions have always been raised. I just had a very clear-cut answer to it. This assembly has already decided what is the definition of political prisoner, and for the assembly, it doesn't really matter if there's not some other universal definition of this word. We've already defined it for ourselves. So that should be enough for the assembly. We listen to ourselves as well, you know. And I think I understand where this argument comes from, but I just fundamentally disagree with it.
You went to Azerbaijan. What did you see? Is that a country that you expect a Council of Europe member to be like? Was it surprising for you to observe the conditions on the ground? The people you've met, you probably have met a lot of people, you've heard a lot of stories. Was that at all surprising to you? What was the most surprising thing?
I think what impacted me the most was going to Gobustan prison, because their conditions are very, very bad, and I found it quite upsetting to see the kinds of conditions that are there, especially knowing that Azerbaijan has been saying that they are going to build a new prison for years now, and it hasn't happened. And you look at the conditions in the cells there, and it is quite a shocking thing to see. It's not something that a Council of Europe member state should offer their prisoners, and I think it contravenes, you know, the standards that we have set for how we treat our detainees. So I found that quite shocking to see. I can't really tell you what the Council of Europe member states should look like. I think we are 47 states and we are all quite different, and we all have our problems. I think my focus was, of course, this issue, political prisoners, and on that note, I was shocked by how, you know, the conditions are, especially in that prison, but also just talking to the detainees was had a lasting and deep effect on me. But I was received very well, and I was treated very well with great hospitality, and I think that the Azeri people are very hospitable people. They took good care of me, and I hope that just because they did that, just because they showed hospitality, that at least I hope that when people read my report, they see that that didn't change my approach to the subject, which was to determine whether or not we had an issue of political prisoners, and I did determine that there is. So I think that also shows that even though, of course, we are polite and we have a dialogue, there was no caviar involved in this one.
I didn't want to bring that caviar up, but we've all heard the allegations. And
well, I think it's understandable that the allegations are raised. I understand the suspicion. I think in an environment of mistrust, in an environment of deep suspicion of the power that is in place right now, it is understandable that people are worried about this, especially considering the history of this issue here in the Parliamentary Assembly. I mean, we know the Strasbourg report, it was mobilized against partially on the basis of corruption, on bribes. This has been determined. So, of course, people are suspicious. I understand that. I just hope that my report speaks for itself in that I wasn't compromised, you know. So, like I say, I understand the suspicion. I reject it. I don't even like caviar. And I think the report, I think the recommendation, I think the work that I put into this report, and the sort of, I mean, I do have a heart for it, and I hope that it shines through, that I do really care, and nobody has even tried. I think it's obvious that there's no point.
today on the floor, I understand you're saying you put your heart into the report and you hope it shines. It does. But today on the floor, you were accused of burning the bridges, damaging the relations. From this accusation came from Samat Said, of the head of the Azerbaijani delegation. And you were even told that you interfered in political process in Azerbaijan vis-à-vis the coming elections. Do you feel you broke the relations? Do you feel you damaged anything? Do you feel you interfered?
No, I think it's the authorities of Azerbaijan who are sabotaging their own relationship by not implementing the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights, by blatantly not even implementing the judgment, the Article 46 judgment, which is an unprecedented event, and they are still not implicating that. Mr. Sadov accused me of interfering with the upcoming elections, the February 9 elections, by making a statement about the fact that Mr. Ilgar Mammadov was prevented from participating in the elections. And you saw my answer on the floor as well. I mean, preventing the opposition from participating in the elections, that is interfering in the elections, not me making a statement about the interference.
So you feel the government interfered and you just brought up the fact that it interfered, and that's why you're being accused?
I reacted to the status that the authorities had still not fulfilled its obligations to implement the judgment of the court, which was to quash the sentence against Ilgar Mammadov and actually other candidates as well, to allow them to stand for elections. And they did not do that, so he cannot stand. And this is a direct and blatant disregard of the court's judgment. So I was simply stating a fact. The Azeri authorities did not fulfill its obligations to implement the judgment. And I criticized them for that because, and I did say that the current regime was revealing their increasingly undemocratic nature, because it is very undemocratic to exclude the opposition from elections. I don't know how it could be interpreted in any other way.
It was said you've arrived at controversial conclusions, biased judgments, and you were particularly criticized for the use of the word regime. Would you use it again? You just did, but would you use it again? Do you think you were right to use that word?
I think regime is a descriptive word. It's perhaps a bit harsh. I found it a bit strange that actually the word regime seemed to bother Mr. Sadov more than the fact that they were undemocratic. Would I use it again? You know, I try always to be the diplomat. Maybe I could have been more diplomatic, but to be honest, I found it a very shocking defiance towards the court. So I did, I think, respond in a measure that I felt was proportionate to the severity of the issue. I feel I've always been very cordial and polite to the Azeri authorities. I was very open-minded when I started with this report. I was very clear. I had no foregone conclusions. I did not make my mind up in advance. And would I use it again? Sure, if the opportunity, or if the, not opportunity, but if a reason arises, I would.
You said in your closing statement, addressing, I believe it was Samad Seidov, that you punish people for speaking their minds because you disagreed with, I believe, the Azerbaijani delegation changing its opinion. It's 180% from the Paris meeting. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that a country that, in your assessment, punishes people for speaking their minds, after 20 years of being a Council of Europe member, do you really believe it belongs here?
Well, I made it very clear in my speech that Azerbaijan is in a very dangerous place when it comes to its membership of the Council of Europe. When you repeatedly refuse to implement the court's judgments, when you're in defiance of the Committee of Ministers and possibly now even the Assembly, then you are in a very bad place. You know, it is a worrisome status for the Azeri authorities. I hope that Azerbaijan belongs here. I want it to stay. But for that, it does need to fix this problem. It has been going on for a long time. And we've had, you know, our ups and downs when it comes to dealing with this issue. The Council itself, we have our own mistakes to make up for, which I think that this report, in part at least, does. In some ways, it redeems the Strasbourg report, which was killed because of corruption. And I think it shows our sort of true commitment to really bringing this matter to a close. But of course, like I say, this is a very risky place for Azerbaijan to be in. And I think it's food for thought for the Azeri authorities where they want to proceed from here, because I think they are reaching a dead end. And at some point, they won't have any more evasive maneuvers. They will have to face the facts and start dealing with these structural changes that are needed to protect freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of opinion in the Republic of Azerbaijan. These are fundamental tenets of our democracy. They need to be in place to belong here. And we are offering our help, our support, but also we are setting really high pressure on the authorities to comply, to fulfill their obligations, because this is what is required to stay here.
A lot of people who watch us, they might not understand the intricacies of how the process works. They confuse European Union with the Council of Europe, etc., etc. They don't understand maybe that the court decisions of ECHR are binding for member states, of which Azerbaijan is a member state. Could you explain to those people who might not be very sure as to what's going on, what are the repercussions for a member state not to abide by the court's decisions? What can happen? What is the worst case scenario that you're trying to warn the authorities of?
Well, I mean, I feel like what was considered the worst case scenario has already happened, and that is this Article 46. Now, I understand what you say. People don't know exactly what it is about. I think European institutions are not very helpful in helping the public understand what they're about. The European Court of Justice of the European Union versus the European Court of Human Rights, and the European Council and the Council of Europe, it's all very confusing. We're not being very helpful, I think, in helping people understand. But the European Court of Human Rights, it has the absolute binding authority to interpret the European Convention of Human Rights. Now, that is a binding international legal instrument, and it means that the member states of the Council of Europe, which are 47 right now, have taken on the obligation to fulfill its judgments, especially those that are individually directed against each member state. And when the European Court finds that there has been a violation, and they find that this violation needs to be remedied in one way or another, then it is incumbent upon the state to fulfill what the judgment says needs to be done to remedy this breach of the convention. Now, Article 46 is an extreme measure, one that many, I think, experts believed would never be used. It's been called the nuclear option because it is quite serious. So you have the European Court of Human Rights, and they render a judgment against the member state, and then it is the Committee of Ministers, the sort of executive body of the Council of Europe, the executive body of the Council of Europe. It's their job to ensure implementation of these judgments, that judgments are executed, so to speak. And if they feel that a member state is refusing to implement the court's judgment, then exceptionally they can refer it back to the court and ask it to find that a member state is in a violation of its obligation to fulfill the court's findings, to fulfill the court's judgments. This has never happened before. It has only happened once in the case of Ilgar Mammadov, and it is a very serious thing because it could mark the beginning of sort of ejection procedures. It really could. No member state has gotten this close to being in a place where that really needs to be considered.
Council of Europe brings together many countries, many different countries. Some are large and powerful. Some have strong economies, some are not as much. Is it surprising that the decisions, that the procedures and the rules are violated by a country that not many would describe as an economic superpower, not many would describe as a military superpower? Basically, we're talking about Azerbaijan, not a large population, not a very, let's say, sizable nation. Is it surprising? What does it say about the COE, Council of Europe, and its, let's say, teeth when it comes to larger countries? What if Turkey or Russia look at the example of Azerbaijan? That's what some people say might happen, and say, listen, Azerbaijan can get away with anything. Why can't we? Why can't Russia ignore the decision? Why can't Turkey ignore the? Does it enter the calculation in people's minds in this building? Do you think?
Sure. It's also the constant argument of every single state that would not like to be criticized by the Council of Europe. It is always, well, don't look at me, look at the other people. It is, I think, with almost every single critical report that we have agreed to, some will show up with the argument that somewhere else there is some other problem that we are not addressing in a report about a completely different problem.
And we heard that today, didn't
Yes,
we?
of course we heard that today. We hear that every time. So no, it's not surprising whatsoever. It is a typical argument for somebody that doesn't have any replies to the actual criticism in place. I think all of the Council of Europe member states, they have problems. My own country is included. And I actually sometimes find it quite frustrating that the sort of presumption of innocence always looms over my country because it's considered so liberal and wonderful and great in equality. And
Iceland
yes,
has problems?
I find, well, of course Iceland has problems. Iceland has problems. We are a very small community. We have especially problems with nepotism in Iceland because we have a tiny population and a very big sort of network of people that are interconnected in business and politics and all sorts of things like that. And I feel like sometimes it doesn't really get through because we're so lovely, we're so, equal and nice. And although a lot of that is true, we have our own problems, and I think that we should not, I don't want to disregard that. I think that's very true. We are here to help each other out, handle our problems, because it's very often very hard to look in the mirror and say, okay, I have a problem. It's easier to point at someone else and say, you have a problem. But that's why there's 47 of us here to debate about our common values, our common rules and standards. And we are also always debating about, how far is too far? And this is a question that has been raised in relation to Azerbaijan, in relation to Russia, in relation to Turkey, and in some measure towards other countries as well. And it's a constant debate, and one that we really need to have, of course. But I think, at least my general position is, I hope so, I think so, that they are better in than out, that it really needs to be the absolutely last resort to eject the state, because if we do that, the conversation stops. If we do that, we no longer offer the possibility of the citizens of these countries to go to our human rights temple, the European Court of Human Rights, which I think is one of Europe's proudest achievements. I think it's such a beautiful construct that we made to protect the rights of our citizens. We did it because we had a horrible experience before my time, but we wanted to not repeat that. We wanted to ensure the rights of our citizens, and I think the more people that are in, the better. The more people that have access to the court, the better. And we can always be criticized for not being harsh enough or not being, the rough parent that just kicks its alcoholic child out to the curb. But I don't think that these kinds of methods really work. I much rather believe in compassion, in the power of dialogue, the power of democracy, and the power of the European Court of the Human Rights, because I think that is, like I say, I'm a big fan of that court.
We did our best to follow you through your trip to Azerbaijan. We interviewed almost everybody you spoke with. We couldn't find you, but we did the next best thing.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
It's fine. You were very busy there. When you visited Azerbaijan, what I wanted to ask you is, did you feel in Europe, did you feel your values were shared? You met with the government, you met with probably opposition, I don't know, but you met with people outside the government as well. You met with human rights defenders, I know that for sure.
Yeah.
Did you feel in Europe, did you feel your message was being heard? Did you feel your values were being shared by the government or by the people?
I don't think I ever asked myself the question of whether or not I felt in Europe. Azerbaijan is truly very different to my home country. But then Iceland is also a bit far removed from Europe, at least geographically speaking. We are in the middle of nowhere there in the sea.
Almost as close to America as it
exactly.
is to
We are
Central
actually on the
Europe.
two tectonic plates of Europe and America, and it's sort of pulling us apart, And I often find that many of the attributes of the Icelandic nations have more in common with America than Europe, actually. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a difficult subject that I wouldn't really want to classify, but my conversation with the government showed or government or the officials or the state, let's say, if we want to phrase it like that. I think they showed they did not agree with the fact that there was a problem of political prisoners, and they did not agree with the fact that it was a structural problem within the within the Republic of Azerbaijan, which, of course, there we then just fundamentally disagree. I put my faith in the findings of the court, and I mean, I elaborate that quite well in my explanatory memorandum, that it was disappointing that it was dismissed, this troubling pattern that the court identified, the structural changes that are needed to remedy it, and that there is a problem with the independence of the sort of justice system in Azerbaijan.
And lastly, what do you expect will happen after this message today? We have elections coming up.
Yes.
What do you hope will happen? And maybe, if I may ask your opinion, what do you think will happen?
It's a difficult question.
I ask difficult questions, I'm sorry.
I hope that it will take us one step forward towards redeeming the justice system in Azerbaijan and stopping political persecution of people. I really do hope that it does that. What I think will happen is that this report will give added strength to those responsible for the execution of judgments on the Committee of Ministers side. I really do think that it does. I hope that it gives strength and renewed energy to all of these people, these wonderful people I met in Azerbaijan that are fighting for a more inclusive democratic society there. I hope that it gives them some strength. I mean, I don't know what else I could sort of offer with it. It's just that at least now the Assembly has agreed on this. The Assembly has said this, and it does have weight. It does have an impact, or you wouldn't see the authorities fighting tooth and nail against it. If they didn't care about it, if it didn't have any impact, I don't think they would be so adamantly, opposing it. To put it I'm trying to be more diplomatic now. I think it does have an impact. I think it will. But it is on the Committee of Ministers side, of course, to continue with this. And we can't forget that we also just approved a new procedure that is open to us if all else fails. And I will have the mandate to follow up on this report for a full year from the day of today. So today is the 30th of January. So until the 30th of January next year, I have the mandate to follow up on how well Azerbaijan is actually fulfilling the recommendations that we have made. I will follow up, of course, on that. So there are several things that will happen. How exactly it'll end, it's hard to say. But like I say, they are on thin ice. And I hope that they find firmer ground. And now I think we are stronger behind it also, all of us together.
Will we see you in Azerbaijan anytime soon, do you think? Would you like to go? Will you be allowed to come? What do you...
I guess the test of that will be whether or not I will be allowed to come to the election observation mission for these elections, where I have signed up. And the mission has been approved, so including my name. So I fail to see how they would not allow me to get into the country. Mm-hmm. What I will do after that, we will have to see. Whether I will come back after that or not, I don't want to promise. We'll see if it becomes necessary.
Well, we wish you luck in your mission, and we will try to keep in touch and follow you through your hopefully easy path through the next year.
Thank you very
much for your time.
Thanks.